Good evening and welcome. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU or UCIMC, or, as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and anyone whose writing I may be reading throughout the show. Okay, so on the last show, we left off in the middle of a very interesting thing, which I'm going to pick up again on this show and continue on with, because I think it is a really useful piece. I was reading from the Cato Institute's 2021 Immigration and Identity National Survey. Now, for those who aren't familiar with the Cato Institute, that's kind of a libertarian think tank. So this is not, your lefty immigrant hugging organization. This is a group that's, has its own views and its own biases, but it's important to understand where people are coming from when they do this. But anyway, this is from a survey that they did. I read the first portion last week, and we, of course, ran out of time because it's really long. So I will continue on with it here today. And it starts up with a section entitled, What Americans Think About Illegal Immigration. So to begin with, 55% of Americans surveyed, whoever they surveyed, support a pathway to citizenship for unauthorized immigrants. That's more than half. Sorry about the dog. There's a dog that lives right outside my window, and my window is, of course, open because it's a nice day. So maybe he's saying hello. He wants to be on the radio. I'm not sure. Anyway, a majority of Americans support offering unauthorized immigrants a path to become citizens if they meet certain requirements. 1/4 want to deport unauthorized immigrants. About 1/5 support permanent legal residency without the offer of citizenship. And another 4% say the country should do nothing about those living in the country illegally. 56% say simplifying legal immigration is the better way to deal with illegal immigration. When asked to choose a better approach for dealing with illegal immigration, a majority think it's better to make the legal immigration process easier. 43% would rather build a border wall and increase border security. Excuse me. So we know who they are. All right. Confidence in the U.S. government's ability to control who immigrates to the U.S. may contribute to these preferences. 72% of those who believe the government has at least a moderate amount of control over immigration think simplifying the process is the best way to deal with illegal immigration. However, 67% of those who think the government has little to no control think building a border wall is the better option. And this, as a side note, this is an interesting difference between your standard Republican and your standard Democrat, at least. Republicans, since Reagan and probably long before, you remember Reagan's famous quote, like, government can't solve the problem, government is the problem. So a lot of Republicans and people that ascribe to that way of thinking believe that government makes things worse, that the government can't do things right, is incapable of making good decisions or acting responsibly or whatever. And so they want to limit that. They want to cut down on government and get it out of the way and let people do their own thing, or whatever. Whereas on the other hand, Democrats tend to believe more in the ability of government to solve problems, and so on and so forth. So it would stand to reason that the party of anti-immigration would suspect that the government has no control over immigration, or little to no control, and therefore building a border wall is the only thing you can do to keep people out. Leaving aside, of course, why you would want to keep people out, that's a whole different question. But, that's an interesting point that I think speaks to who is holding these opinions and why. Anyway, back to our story. Democrats and independents are much more likely to want to simplify the legal immigration process than Republicans. Instead, more than 3/4 of Republicans prefer increasing border security and erecting a wall. So that speaks to, again, what not only what you think about immigration, but what you think about immigrants. Because if you want it to make it possible for people to come here, and you think that's a good thing, then your thinking revolves around coming up with ways to make that more likely to happen in an orderly way. If your idea of taking control of immigration is making it an orderly process, whereas if your idea is keeping people out, we don't want them here, please go away, then your idea of taking control of immigration is shutting doors and building walls, just basically making it harder to get here. So if that depends on your end goal, and that's why some of these questions can never be answered between the two groups, because the end result they're looking to achieve is entirely different. Okay, sorry. I keep editorializing and getting off track here. So, 41% believe some immigrants illegally enter or stay in the U.S. because of the difficult legal immigration process. Oh, really? A plurality of Americans, 41%, believe that immigrants who illegally enter or stay in the U.S. do so because the legal immigration process was too expensive or difficult. A fifth, 21%, say it's because they don't respect American immigration law. And another fifth, 19%, think it's because they were ineligible to apply for legal residency or citizenship. Few think it's because unauthorized immigrants have something to hide or because they just haven't had the time to apply for citizenship. Partisans have different perceptions. Republicans are more likely than Democrats to attribute illegal immigration to nefarious motives. For instance, a plurality of Republicans, 39%, think some immigrants illegally enter or stay in the U.S. because they don't respect American immigration law, compared to 5% of Democrats. Instead, 57% of Democrats think illegal immigration is due to an expensive and difficult legal process, compared to 23% of Republicans. Partisans are about equally likely to think it's due to ineligibility, 20% Republicans, 19% Democrats. Americans estimate half of Latino immigrants and 29% of Asian immigrants are undocumented. The survey asked respondents to estimate what percentage of Latino immigrants. Okay, I see what's going on here. Each of these little headings is almost like a chapter heading or something. So if I just don't read those, then I'm not repeating myself all the time. Those are like bullet points that don't actually have bullets next to them. Okay, sorry. The survey asked respondents to estimate what percentage of Latino immigrants and Asian immigrants, respectively, they believe are in the United States illegally. Americans estimate that 50% of Latino immigrants and 29% of Asian immigrants are in the U.S. illegally. There aren't major differences in perceptions among partisans or immigration restrictionists or expanders. Instead, opinions differ by immigration background. First-generation immigrants estimate that 60% of Latino immigrants and 41% of Asian immigrants are undocumented. Second-generation immigrants estimate that 52% of Latino immigrants and 35% of Asian immigrants are undocumented. And the third generation and higher estimate that 49% of Latino immigrants and 26% of Asian immigrants are undocumented. Nearly 3/4 of Americans say it is unacceptable for people to illegally immigrate to the U.S., although most 56%, support making the legal immigration process easier, and 55% support providing a pathway to citizenship for the undocumented who are already here. Strong liberals stand out, however, with 68% who say that illegal immigration is acceptable. But this divides the Democratic coalition. A majority of moderate liberals disagree, 55%, and say it is unacceptable. First-generation immigrants also have different views. A slim majority of immigrants believe it is acceptable for people to illegally immigrate to the U.S., 52%. However, second-generation immigrants disagree, 57%, as do 77% of other native-born Americans. The data suggests that first-generation Latino immigrants and white immigrants are more likely than Asian immigrants to believe illegal immigration is acceptable. However, caution is needed when interpreting these numbers because the survey was conducted in English and thus misses first-generation immigrants who are not fluent in English, whose opinions may differ from those who took the survey. Interesting. Most Americans, 64%, believe that the children of unauthorized immigrants should be allowed to attend U.S. public schools, while 36% think they should not. Republicans stand out with 58% saying children of undocumented parents should not be allowed to attend public schools. In contrast, 85% of Democrats and 55% of independents think they should. A majority of Americans support granting automatic citizenship to children born in the United States to undocumented parents, 61%, as the Constitution grants. 39% oppose. Republicans again stand out with a majority, 61%, who oppose granting birthright citizenship to children of parents who are in the country illegally. In contrast, majorities of Democrats, 83%, and independents, 53%, support it. Wow. Going to be hard to come to some kind of middle ground on this stuff. A majority, 58% of Republicans, support stripping the U.S. citizenship of children of undocumented parents. This is perhaps unsurprising because Republicans view birthright citizenship for children born to parents who are in the country illegally as illegitimate in the first place. Solid majorities of Democrats and independents, 78% and 61%, are opposed to doing this. Yeah. Okay, this is interesting. How Americans feel toward immigrants. Americans differ in their perceptions of immigrants. When asked which best described how they feel about immigrants in the United States, 6% think of immigrants primarily as family, 19% as friends, 41% as neighbors, 21% as guests, 7% as intruders, and 6% as invaders. Comparing partisans, Democrats feel closer to immigrants than Republicans do. Democrats are more likely than Republicans to think of immigrants as family, 8% versus 4%, friends, 24 versus 14, and neighbor, 45 versus 36. Democrats are less likely than Republicans to think of immigrants as guests, 16 versus 25, intruders, 3 versus 10%, or invaders, 3 versus 10%. A similar pattern holds when comparing immigration restrictionists and expanders. Expanders are more likely than restrictionists to think of immigrants as family, friends, and neighbors. Expanders are less likely than restrictionists to think of immigrants as guests, intruders, or invaders. While few Americans think of immigrants as invaders, one group stands out among those who want to decrease immigration a lot. Nearly a quarter, 23%, think of immigrants primarily as invaders. This is nearly 6 times higher than other immigration restrictionists who want to decrease immigration somewhat. Okay. A majority of Americans, 54%, say that an immigrant legally residing in the U.S. who disliked America and said Americans are racist should be deported, while 46% oppose. That's interesting. Majorities of first-generation immigrants, regardless of racial background, agree with deportation, as do the third generation and higher. However, a majority of second-generation immigrants oppose. Major partisan differences emerge. Only 69% of Republicans and 52% of independents favor deporting an immigrant who dislikes America and thinks the country is racist, while 31% and 47% would oppose respectively. Conversely, 57% of Democrats would oppose and 42% would support. These differences are starker by ideology. Fully 75% of strong liberals oppose, followed by 67% of liberals, 45% of moderates, and 30% of conservatives. So if you live here and you don't like it, and you think Americans are racist, you should be deported. That's kind of... Anyway. Okay, whatever. Section 2. See, we're just on Section 2 of this. What Americans think about immigration reforms. What should America do about immigration policy? 2/3 of Americans, 66%, say that businesses should be allowed to hire whoever they believe is best qualified for the job, regardless of nationality. 1/3 instead believe that businesses should be required to give preference to American-born workers. Democrats solidly agree, 77%, that businesses should be allowed to hire whoever they believe is most qualified regardless of nationality. Majorities of independents and Republicans, 60 and 56% respectively, also agree, but by smaller margins than among Democrats. Nearly 2/3, 62% of Americans say that when businesses cannot find enough workers to fill needed jobs, such as agricultural, farming, and construction, they should be allowed to hire and bring as many migrant workers as needed from other countries. 38% oppose. An overwhelming majority of Democrats, 78%, say that businesses should be allowed to hire as many migrant workers as needed. Independents and Republicans have mixed views. Independents favor such hiring by a margin of 52% to 47%. Republicans oppose it by a margin of 47% to 52%. Opposite. Support varies by immigration background. Strong majorities of first-generation immigrants and second-generation immigrants, 82 and 77% respectively, say businesses should be allowed to hire as many migrant workers as needed to fill open jobs. A majority of native-born respondents who are not second-generation immigrants also agree, but are more than 20 points less likely to do so. 63% of Americans support creating a new type of immigration visa, like a green card, but specifically for entrepreneurs. 37% oppose. Support is cross-partisan, with 70% of Democrats, 61% of Republicans, and 51% of independents who support it. Notably, a majority, 53% of President Trump's most fervent supporters, those who rated him 10 out of 10, also support this proposal. Interesting. So they want entrepreneurs. One group stands out in opposition to this proposal. 60% of Americans who want to decrease immigration a lot oppose this kind of visa. However, among those who want to decrease immigration somewhat, a majority, 58%, support it. This indicates that people who want to decrease immigration a lot versus somewhat may have different reasons for doing so. In this case, lukewarm restrictionists may be more influenced than stringent restrictionists by the skill level of new immigrants. Okay. More than 2/3, 67%, of Americans believe legally immigrating to the United States is fairly difficult, while 1/3 think it's fairly easy. Apparently, they haven't tried it yet. Notably, Republicans, 49%, are more likely to think that the immigration process is fairly easy than Democrats, 21%, or independents, 30%. Republicans also are more likely than Democrats to say there are too many immigrants coming from many parts of the world. Latin America versus the Middle East, 68 to 25%. Oh, wait. No. I read that wrong. This is hard with all these numbers. So, okay. Republicans are also more likely than Democrats to say there are too many immigrants coming from many parts of the world. Latin America, 68% versus 25%. I guess the numbers are Republicans saying yes and no to that. The Middle East, 58% versus 22%. Africa, 42 versus 15. Asia, 41 versus 15. Western Europe, 32 versus 15. And Eastern Europe, 34 versus 15. The Republican view that immigration is fairly easy may reflect this concern. Okay, 52% of Americans think the immigration process should be easier. Oh, it should be faster. Sorry. Survey respondents were informed that the average immigrant waits about 5 years before being allowed to move to the U.S. Then they were asked how many years they think it should take. A majority, 52%, say it should take less than 5 years. About a quarter, 28%, want to maintain the status quo of 5 years, and a fifth, 20%, think it should take more than 5 years. Why? Okay, nearly two-thirds of Democrats believe the process should take less than 5 years, as well as pluralities of independents and Republicans, 40%. There is little partisan disagreement about the process taking more than 5 years. 23% of Republicans and independents and 18% of Democrats think the process should take longer than it currently does. Most Democrats and Republicans may agree that eligible immigrants should not have to wait more than 5 years to move to the U.S., but they may disagree about how many or which immigrants should be eligible in the first place. Okay, so 59% of Republicans say voting on immigration levels and origins should be up to voters. Research conducted before the survey's fielding revealed that many immigration restrictionists felt voters had no say in the country's immigration policies. To more closely examine this concern, the survey asked respondents if they thought voters should be able to vote directly on immigration policy, much like a state ballot initiative. Americans lean against such direct voting. Nearly half, 47%, think voters should be able to vote on how many immigrants are allowed to move to the United States each year and from which countries. However, a majority, 53%, say this shouldn't be up to voters. You will be surprised to learn that significant partisan differences exist. 59% of Republicans say citizens should be able to directly vote on immigration levels and origins. However, two-thirds of Democrats disagree. Independents are evenly divided. The more one wants to restrict immigration, the more one favors direct voting on the issue. Only 72% of those who want to decrease immigration, a lot, want voters to be allowed to vote on immigration levels and origins. This declines to 56% among those who want to decrease it somewhat, 42% among those who want to keep it the same, and 35% among those who want to increase immigration. 56% say simplifying legal immigration process is a better way to deal with illegal immigration. 43% would prefer to build a border wall and increase border security. Confidence in the U.S. government's ability. Wait a minute. That was earlier. We just already read that. Okay. Okay. Okay, let me find the place. Okay, all right. Most think that the immigration system should give equal preference to high-skilled workers and U.S. relatives. According to the Public Policy Institute of California, most first-generation immigrants granted green cards are admitted because they have family members who are U.S. citizens or green card holders. Few, about 1 in 10, are admitted based on employment criteria or skill. However, few, 14%, Americans think preferences should be given to family members over high-skilled workers. Instead, a majority, 58%, of Americans say equal preference should be given to both immigrants with high-level skills and those who have family members already living in the U.S., and about a quarter think preferences should be given to those with high skill levels. Similarly, only 11% of Americans think the U.S. immigration system should prefer culturally similar immigrants over high-skilled immigrants. Instead, a majority, 55%, think equal preference should be given to both, and a third think preference should be given to high-skilled workers. Republicans are more inclined to favor high-skilled immigrants over family members of U.S. residents or culturally similar immigrants. 40% of Republicans would give preference to high-skilled workers over those with U.S. family members. Similarly, 39% of Republicans would prefer high-skilled workers over culturally similar immigrants. But most Republicans in both cases say equal preference should be given to both high-skilled workers and U.S. family members, or high-skilled workers and culturally similar immigrants. Democrats are less likely to think the immigration system should give priority to high-skilled workers. 19% would give preference to highly skilled immigrants over immigrants with U.S. family members. Most would give both groups equal preference. Somewhat more Democrats give priority to high-skilled workers, 30%, over culturally similar immigrants, 11%. But most, 59%, want both to be given equal preference. Americans oppose a proposal to allow immigrants to buy entry into the United States that would allow them to live and work but would not directly lead to citizenship. 7 in 10 oppose the proposal regardless of whether the fee charged were $10,000 or $50,000 per entry. The fact that the public does not distinguish between those prices shows that opposition may have more to do with the principle of buying entry, or that for some the price may be too low. First generation, 46%, and second generation, 45% immigrants, are more likely to support a $10,000 purchased entry than native-born Americans who are not second-generation immigrants, 25% of those. That's really interesting. I would never have even considered that idea. Interestingly, both Democrats and Republicans, 69% and 72%, are opposed to buying entry into the country. Libertarians stand out as one of the few groups with a majority, 53%, who support this proposal. That's really interesting. I don't know why that surprises me, but it does. Okay, what Americans think about welfare and immigration. I bet I can tell you. A majority, 58%, of Americans would support increasing immigration to the U.S. if immigrants had to prove before entering that they would not use government welfare services. 41% opposed. Majorities of first-generation immigrants, 67%,